Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So this is a video that's going to be in the. I guess it's I'm going to put this audio also in the Journey series. Hopefully, I remember to do it because I've already done an audio that you're about to hear, and I'm talking about just things to do with my my regular videos and channels, this stuff to do with Trump. But I get into the Maha Pralaya, which is the dissolution of the universe, which is a part of the Sahaj Marg philosophy or understanding of how the universe works, where the universe implodes on itself. And I needed to put this in a separate video on the gratefulness meditation, and so the audio is not specifically about that, but it ends up there. And so I'm going to play you that audio next. I describe it. I like the way that's described. And so the picture that you're seeing is a picture of, I made this universal picture where you have, at the center, you have God, and God is the most subtle. And then as you move towards the periphery of the universe, things are grosser and grosser, right? More solid, gross in terms of the more solid, less subtle. So you have subtle, God, the most subtle, divine love, energy, the creation of the universe. And that center is in everybody's center. Whatever you are, every rock, at every whatever it is, like a plant, every, whatever you penetrate to the center, you find the subtlety of God's love. And so that's the picture here that I've created, where you move from the center, which is subtle, and then everything assumes grosser and grosser forms as the universe was created. And you have the etheric element, the etheric universe in the center, closest to the center, your soul, your etheric self. And then the material world, third dimensional material world, things like rocks and, whatever it is, physical matter, right? Whatever, oil, the things that are in the earth. And there's spiritual energy behind all creation. The earth itself has a soul, like a soul energy. And, in the center of anything, you'll experience God. So you have to penetrate to the center of whatever it is, and mostly yourself, because that's, the most important, the easiest to access. And that's your heart, and through your heart, the energy in what's called the central region in the Sahaj Marg system. And so that's how, the universal creation story is from this thing I talk about in the audio, the Kashob, and, this idea of this mere thought, this mere suggestion that created the ever-expanding universe and the internal universe and all of the soul energy and all the things that manifest the physical universe, all these things was created in that, initial creation. And then there's eventually this destruction called the Maha Pralaya, where the universe implodes on itself, which is something that, if the knowledge is there and you can understand the knowledge, you can understand these ideas, it's a good thing to kind of have a concept, because everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the universe itself has that. But anyways, I talk about it extensively. I got other things to do here, so I'm not going to repeat everything, just to give you an idea of where this is going. The Mahapralaya. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So I saw something yesterday that Trump said, which just disqualifies everything he says, and he treating his people horribly, like, his supporters. We're going to get into it, and I want to do the introduction first, because YouTube doesn't like you to swear in the first, 3 minutes of your videos. And I'm going to be swearing. I'm eager to get to this thing. It's something I showed everyone in the last video, but I thought quite a bit about it last night. I got all this supporting clips of Trump and what all this stuff means. And so let me get to the comment first, and I want to get right into the other stuff. It's like, something that needs to be said. And so this isn't about the person's comment, but I want to talk about the person's comment. And but mostly this is about the YouTube bot auto generated response. Paul, I was wondering, have you ever thought about putting your content in a podcast format for new viewers, listeners, probably better than Rumble? The bot's response is, It's all on the channel. And the other person says, I'm a visual person, so video is my preferred format. Uh, this is what the bot said. I'm a visual person, so the video is my preferred format. What a bizarre thing to say. How would the bot know that? How would the bot know whether I'm a visual person? Just weird, like leaps of whatever. Like it's just like playing roulette with the like with the comment, like just assumes things or making it's a hit or miss type of thing. It is kind of a podcast what I do, but the video clips in terms of what I'm talking about content, like what I'm going to do today, make the videos better. Like podcasts are very whatever, they're the big thing right now. But it's always been kind of like a podcast what I do. Except I'm not interviewing people. I mean the podcasts are more about interviewing and having multiple people have a discussion and things, which I appreciate that format, but it's not what I do well. People would respond better if I did a live kind of broadcast and they could comment and you could get a lot more money generated through like donations. That's how, people have done in the past. But my show would be a lot worse. Like I would be distracted by the comments, responding to comments. I'm not a social person. And, if I'm in a conversation with somebody, their energy affects me. Their consciousness affects me. And it's distracting. Like, the insights that I have are so much more available to me if I'm just sitting by myself talking and I get into a more meditative state, I'm more relaxed, and I don't have to be social. Like I don't have to think about the other person and responding to them. Because of the Sahaj Marg method of meditation, I can like hear people's, like I can feel their reaction. Like I can kind of, I know what they're thinking. Like it's just, part of it's doing the meditation. Part of it's just my training as a counselor. In terms of doing psychological assessments. But I'm sensitive to, and I read people's, whatever their responses, and I can tell when somebody's reacting to what I'm saying. And I could feel, let's say I was talking in front of an audience, and I said something, and there was 20% were Trumpers, and I said something about Donald Trump. I would feel the reaction of their resistance to what I'm saying, and then I'd have to deal with that, right? Instead of just being able to say the truth as I felt it and saw it, I don't have to deal with anybody else's bullshit and their reactions. And so it makes what I'm doing here better. And, it doesn't pull me outside of myself, right? It's just, where I'm going into a sort of meditative state and information can come through me, that's not necessarily coming from me, coming from some, etheric, being or some, the God or whatever it is, right? And so like it's, this is where I do best. That's why I don't do these other types of shows. People have to either rise up to something or, whatever it is. They have to appreciate something. My show's never going to be something that's going to appeal to the masses and to, certain levels of people that are, they're just not capable of seeing beyond whatever superficial things that they see, right? It's something that people have to, have a sense of, like just in terms of who I am as a person, when people meet me, people have a reaction to me, and some people just like love me, right off the bat, like without anything. They just feel something there that is beyond, they have to get past me being, kind of an asshole or whatever, or just not friendly or, just, I mean, I'm not reaching out to, I'm not a good social person, a person that networks, a person that's going to win people over in terms of my, warmth and kindness and my, I mean, there's people who are great at that, and I'm like on the low end of that kind of thing. Like I'm never going to win people over based on my behaviors. Like people have to see past, my personality or my, my not wanting to interact with people. Most of my social relationships in the initial part is people who really, want to have me as a friend or whatever, in terms of my my love life or whatever, it comes from the other person being more, assertive and having to, look past, whatever my initial reactions because I'm not interested in that. Like I'm not pursuing that, right? So, I enjoy my alone time or whatever it might be. And so, I like interacting with people. I mean, over the years, but people who are introverted, highly introverted, they recharge from being alone and they get drained when they're with other people. So, anyways, just a weird comment from this bot, weird response. But like the format's not really going to change that much because it's what I'm able to do and I've gotten proficient at it. And what I have to offer that maybe sets me apart is thrives with me being able to be by myself and just talk and just be able to say whatever needs to be said without any kind of reaction from other people that would be present, right? Like I tighten up more, it's easier for me to get into this kind of state where I'm more, able to allow the energy to flow. I tighten up more when I'm with other people, and then your consciousness is pulled out. Like when there's kids learn through playing. When you're a little kid, you learn through playing. That's how you're integrating yourself into the world. Like there's kids are learning through observing their parents and things. You see a kid will play. Kids will be learning how to do things, building things. When kids are just sitting on the floor, and now of course they give their kids iPads or things like this, at a young age, which is a bad idea. There's no rush to get into technology, but just having physical things to play with. Kids will play with each other and they learn to share and they learn to, then there's social things, but then there's times kids just are playing by themselves. And when you have an abusive parent that yells at you, the kid ends up, when the kid has to be concerned about their parent, like their parent's, emotionally out of control in some way. And so they can't dive into their play. There's times kids are playing, you watch little kids, and they have no idea you're even in the room. They're just lost in their play, and they're developing. They're integrating things. They're like you're born where you're a blank slate, and you have all these things you have to integrate from past lives. A lot of your destiny, what you're going to become, is based in things that you already have in you as a little kid, and they just haven't been awoken yet. They haven't been like activated. It's like a computer that has all these programs on it, and you have to activate all these things, right? You have to open them up, and these different like program. That's a good way to look at what these you have a package of things you're gonna have to deal with. Could be good things, bad things, abilities. Your job, your personality, like all these things are gonna come through. But as a kid, you don't have those in you, and you have to activate these things. And as initial stages, a big part of that's just you playing and doing things like that. And so the kid ends up, and so this is an example. Something I wasn't going to talk about this, and it just came to me while I was, talking about the other thing, right? I had no idea I was going to talk about this today, but like I started talking, and then just through the flow of the, whatever. It's like this is, the beauty of me being able just to do this thing where I'm, talking by myself here. It's just that information ideas just come to me. I pick up the microphone and I get into this sort of meditative state or whatever. And so, whatever. This is like the example of that. And so the kids start realizing they have to be aware of their parent. It's like a predator is in the environment. There's something unsafe in their environment, and they can't dive into their play. They can't, just be a kid. They have to be aware that their parent might come and hit them or yell at them or, whatever abusive situation. Their kids, the siblings are all fucked up because the parents are, it's an unsafe environment, and the kids don't develop all the things they need to develop, especially like when they have to end up being like, some kids have to assume parental duties at 9 years old because their parents are absent. They have to survive. They have to cook for themselves. They have to feed themselves. Their parents aren't there. The parents are using drugs, whatever. Like this is a common thing. One of the parents is left. The mom's overwhelmed, whatever kind of thing, whatever situation is. And kids have to grow up too fast, and they don't get to just be kids and develop these internal worlds, right? They have no, internal worlds. They're just these shallow people, I was thinking about this last night that, a lot of times when you're dealing with people who, especially for women, but, men as well, who are really good looking, like they're the kind of people who their looks, what they look like externally, and how people see them, and they put a lot of effort into it, whether it's exercise or, makeup and hair, women who are just, over the top focused on how they look and using that, how they look, as a tool because they just get advantages, like people who are better looking get treated better, and they get all these things just gifted to them, and they don't have to develop things internally, right? They're oftentimes very superficial people, all these like beauty queens and all this stuff, and then they get older, and their faces, like, they become shitty people. As somebody who develops their internal world, they have a glow. People who become saintly at the highest level, but just, good people who develop a good internal world and have good characters, and they live good lives, and they're right with God. They have a connection to God and their soul. As they get older, and everyone just not going to look, not physically, attractive. I mean, you're going to get wrinkled. You're going to get, just what happens to old people. But they have a glow, and they're very attractive. Not in a sexual way, but they're attractive to people because when you look at them, you're like, oh wow, that's a good person. Like, you can feel their essence. They've lived a good life, and they have something to offer. They have a rich internal world. But people who are successful in superficial ways, if you're like a good athlete, or you're, whatever, you're really smart or whatever, you have these things that aren't about developing something inside, and then the external world is just there for you, and you're very successful because of it. You end up not developing anything inside. Like, everything's externalized to you because you have all this positive feedback in the external world, and you're gifted a lot of things, and you never develop anything that would be substantial inside of you, right? Because when you go through painful things and disappointments and difficulties, I mean, not only are they spiritual blessings, they're gifts for you because the cleaning that you can go through, you also have to go inward and develop some abilities to deal with trauma and difficulties and challenges. And if you don't do that, then you have nothing inside. And there's so many people who, of course, now with the internet, they don't develop anything inside. They don't develop strong internal worlds. And, there's a vast universe. I was going to talk about this. It just came to me, too. So I was going to talk about this last night. And, of course, I want to get to this Trump thing because it's really, to me, an important video of something that I haven't seen before. I mean, I've seen it, but not like this. And I haven't talked about it the way I'm going to talk about it today. But this, this thing's kind of important. So in the Sahaj Marg system, there is a thing called the Maha Pralaya. The Maha Pralaya. We were talking about Maha being the word for great. Other person said it means highest. It's not going to translate well to, English, but there's these words, like the Persian language has something like 50 or 100 words for love, various words for it. Like, we have one. Like, there's we have a language that's good for business. English is a good business, and it affects the way that you see the world and think because of that, right? Because love should have more than one word. Like, love is, and what does love mean to people? Like, love has so many different meanings to people. There's some people who've never felt the energy of love. And so love means something completely different to them, right? And where love means to people showing you affection in like building you up. I'm getting all this love from my fans. I'm getting all this love from my followers, Is it real love, or is it just they tell you how great you are? So love isn't compliments, right? Love is a feeling, and it's something beyond that. So people say love when there's no love there, like no feeling of love, right? There's affection, there's, kindness, there's appreciation, there's positive regard. And so, so these different aspects of the word love. But anyways, this word Maha Pralaya, I'm not pronouncing it right, but it's there in the literature, is when the universe implodes on itself, right? And so it's something really to think about. I think I thought about this quite a bit because it came up a number of times in Babaji's writing, that eventually the universe expands. The universe is expanding right now. And it expands to a certain level after so many years. And then it implodes. It contracts. And everything that's in creation, all the physical worlds, everything in the universe, and the universe is so much more vast than we know about. But even more importantly, we all have an internal universe. We all have our own, whatever's going on inside of us. And there's all these etheric universes where beings of energy are on a different plane of existence and where our soul exists. And that's even more vast than the material universe. I mean, it's not, you can't, it's beyond time and space. But, we're talking about infinity, in terms of like what people would think infinity is. And all of that disappears. There's nothing. Everything goes, like everything. And it's hard to think about. Like if you think about that, it's almost like scary that there wouldn't be anything. You wouldn't exist. I wouldn't exist. Nothing would exist. The earth wouldn't exist. Everything that we know in our life, all of our, and then our soul energy. And it all contracts to a possibility to be created again. Like this has happened before. So in the Sahaj Marg concept of creation, now you think about this, the very childish version, like what I'm talking about, compare it to what you heard as a Christian or as a Jewish person in terms of, I think Muslims believe in the same thing. The idea of Adam and Eve and this, God created the heaven and earth. It's partially true, the book of Genesis, but it's very remedial. And so what I'm saying here is that there was this nothingness, like there's just nothing. But there's this primary stir. And there's this thought, which is, the idea of God. Like there's the female, which is the nothing, the emptiness, the possibility, like the if you think about the womb or the earth, a seed going into the earth, right? And this idea comes, the masculine idea comes and says, let it be, and this idea of just this mere suggestion. And then out of the nothingness, this creation happens. And it happens on all these different levels, the etheric level and the material level. And everything starts expanding and creating. And then there's consciousness, there's individual consciousness, our souls, and things like this, and then all these different levels of creation, right? And so, it's a very interesting idea. And it expands, and then you have all the things that develop over time. And you have these worlds, and then there's physical life and the third dimensional aspect, and then these other etheric dimensions, right? There's all these different dimension of time and space and all these things. And then there's just this expanding of this creation, right? And at some point, it goes the opposite way. It implodes. And this is called the Maha Pralaya. This is going to go in the Journey series, and I should put this up on Gratefulness Meditation. And so, it's something you can't get bogged down on and think about every day. But it's something where you're like, well, it's at some point everything's going to come to an end, right? If this thing is true. Like it's either true or not. And I believe it to be true. Because that's how, like, it's like the universe is exhaling right now. And that exhale lasts, a quadrillion years, whatever it is. There's a, period of measurable by, the fourth dimension of time, right? That there's, we have a linear concept of time and then the circular concept of time. But there is, when the thing was created, the universe was created, that there was, like how did things come to be? Like how did the material world come to be? Like how did the earth come to be? And when was that? In terms of what we measure as time. So we measure time as a linear, like here on earth, things are happening, in a, there's past, present, and future. And we have that, constraints. And in other dimensions, there's none of that because you can bounce around all over the place. And you're an etheric being because you're not bound by, your soul is not bound by the physical laws of linear time, the fourth dimension. But there was a creation. There's, there had to be a creation. In science, there's a creation. There's the Big Bang. In, religion, there's the idea of creation. Christianity, in the book of Genesis, it's, God created the heavens and the earth in 7 days, right? Of course, it's not measurable by time because time didn't exist. Nothing did. And so there's no in 7 days because there's, a day is measured on Earth, a 24-hour period, right? And that's not, the God wasn't bound by the earthly time, the idea of time on Earth, and the whole way that we have a daily cycle, right? Because a daily cycle has to do with the rotation of the Earth and the sunlight, right? And so, like, doesn't exist anywhere else. Days only exist on Earth as a measurable time period. All the other planets rotate, so a day would be a different period of time, right? And so, whatever that, means. And so, at some point, it has to all end. And so, this idea of the Mahapralaya. And Babaji referenced it numerous times in his teachings, in his books, and in his diary, the second master of the system. And he was so devoted to meditation and doing God's work that there was one point in his diary where he writes, today, God gave me the equation for the Mahapralaya. There's a mathematical equation or something that once it's activated, it sets in course the implosion of the universe. And he said, and of course, I ignored it. It's this great passage because, his diary is like, today I had toothache, and, today I intercommuned with Krishna or Jesus or, and he didn't have any idea these diaries would be published. Like, he didn't write the diaries. It was just things he was noting down. And he had this operation where he really didn't have memory, like most people do. And it got worse over the years, where he almost had no, memory, where he just had to be in the moment constantly. And he wouldn't remember things because he was focused. And he was so, otherworldly that, like, when his son died, he had a couple of kids that died. But when his first son died, he experienced, grief in the normal type of what people would. The second son, he didn't know he was dead because he was saw his soul. And his soul was hanging around for a while, and he had no idea his son was physically dead for a while because he was just kind of gone into the etheric world. As you get older, you become more, you're no longer of this planet. And so, he had this experience where he was given the equation to bring about the dissolution of the universe. It's called the dissolution. That's what he calls it. If you look it up in the appendix, Mahapralaya means dissolution of the universe. And so in the idea of this kashob, which is a Sanskrit word that means primary stir, there was this initial very subtle thought from God. And from that thought, human beings' thought force has come from, like our individual thought force and our individual ability to create things. And so when people think of human beings as godlike or God, the element that's in them that's, that's divine in nature, we have this ability to manifest things and higher developed levels of consciousness that any animal, any creature that has any soul that has this level of consciousness, like there's soul energy behind trees and stones and things like this, right? Everything has to have some etheric element behind it. There's soul energy in everything. But a soul for something that's a human being, you have, you look at the difference between animals and people, and you look at the evolutionary sort of spectrum of animals, it's the ability to manifest things. There's animals that can do inventions, and they can, they have levels of thought, higher levels of thought than other creatures, right? Some creatures have more capacity for, almost like abstract thinking. And of course, human beings have the ability to create, in complete worlds. Like people have these, like the Lord of the Rings, for example. A human being created this world, J.R.R. Tolkien, or, the stuff with Harry Potter, where they create this whole universe. And people inhabit that universe, like they dress up like the characters of the movie and TV shows, and they act out these things, and, they think about it. Like, there's people who know how to speak Klingon, right? These Star Trek people. Because this universe, they call it the Marvel universe, or the Star Trek universe, or the Star Wars universe. And these things exist, right, that have come out of a human creation and human manifestation. They're ideas, but they, all these mythical creatures and things that people have either imagined or connected with that exist, existed here on planet Earth before or somewhere else or something, right? But this is, people's ability to manifest things. But anyways, so, there you had this person who, in terms of the Sahaj Marg system, who was capable of having this equation. Like, who would you give that equation to? Like, can you think of somebody that is in this, that that you'd want the equation to bring about the dissolution of the universe? That if you, thought about it and applied your will force to it. Because Babaji wrote that there was going to be a soul that was going to have to activate this equation. There was going to be a being that was going to have to, at the end of time, was going to be responsible for activating this equation to bring back, some consciousness, whatever it was, so etheric consciousness or, living, whatever it might be, to bring about the dissolution of the universe and destroy everything that exists, right? And when you think about things like that, like if you believe that that's going to happen, then everything else becomes kind of relevant, or irrelevant. Like, well, what difference does it make about this minor problem I have in my life when at some point everything's going to come to an end, right? It's hard to even conceive of such a thing. So I had this thought last night, then I forgot about this completely this morning, and then I started talking and it came back to me. And I think there's something else I want to say, but either I'll remember that today or not. I'm eager to get into this thing with Trump because it's kind of in terms of what's going on in the world right now, in terms of the Trumpers, it's very telling. Which is another example of, Trump, he's going to lie, this thing that I said yesterday about him. I showed you this clip from Don Lemons about Trump saying that Hamas was making condoms into bombs, right? And so, I unpacked that a little bit. I thought quite a bit about it last night. I was talking to my wife about it. It's a very significant thing that happened. And so let's get into that here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.